Hey, great. I see a lot of people joining. Lovely. Um, while you guys are joining, I want to let you know that this will be recorded. And if you want to just put in the chat where you're joining from, that would be great because I'd love to see where everyone is joining from tonight. Oh, wow. I'm getting influx. Okay, so all throughout the US, but also it looks like we might have some people from Canada. Oh, we have Alberta and Ottawa. I'm also in New York. I see some New Yorkers, but I also see people who are in much warmer climates. Oh, and it's someone from Chile. Wow. So pretty much all over the world, which is really exciting. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'm going to give it probably another 10 seconds before we get officially started. Oh, we have Brazil, Hawaii, also all different time zones. So whatever time it is that you're joining from, thank you, because I know it's probably very different depending on where you're joining from. So I want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us. This is, I believe, Leland's second dental school week, and I'm excited to be talking to you guys about dental school interviews and how to succeed in them. So my name is Kristie K Stewart, and I am a graduate from Harvard School of Dental Medicine. And if you see the QR code in the upper right-hand corner, that's great for signing up for Leland for free resources and staying in the loop, and I'd highly recommend it. I've been with Leland for over a year now, and I've really enjoyed them. I think the whole team is amazing, and Amanda is here from Leland, and she will be able to answer any questions that you have as well. So without further ado, we'll get started. So let's just change the slide. Okay. So yesterday was the overview of the application and tips and the path to dental school. And today we're going to start off with the interview preparation. And then later you'll have your personal statement deep dive. And I highly recommend that you join that one as well if you can. So to get started, the agenda for today, I'll give a brief introduction about myself. Then we'll give an overview of what we're going to talk about. Then we'll review the three main phases of the dental school interview. I typically think of it as the preparation prior to the interview day itself, and then post interviews. And then we'll sum up in the end with the 5 key points that I think are some of the most important to remember. And at the end, if we have time, we'll go over some questions. So let's get started with a brief introduction. My name's Kristie, as I've mentioned. I'm originally from upstate New York. I started my college career at the University of Rochester studying biomedical engineering. And then I transferred to Union College, which is a smaller liberal arts school, where I graduated with my Bachelor of Science in Biology. I graduated as 2 trimesters early, so a little bit over a semester early. And during that gap year, I worked as a part of an academic success program in one of my local school districts. And then I was really fortunate in my dental school cycle to had lots of interviews, and I was really, really fortunate for that. And from that, I learned a lot. So I ended up choosing to go to the Harvard School of Dental Medicine, where I also sat as an admissions committee member during my 4th year. And I was really, really fortunate to be admitted into an endodontics program at the University of Pennsylvania. And it was actually during residency where I realized my interests and passions were really more in mentoring, education, research, coaching, public health. So I decided to actually shift away from clinical care at that point. And now when I'm not on Leland, I'm also teaching in a post-bac master's program and an undergraduate biology program close to home. And I'm also a student as well. I'm doing my master's in public health at the University of Albany. So when I have coached in the past, I've had a pleasure of coaching a lot of dental, pre-dental students and interviewing students, but also in college, especially in transfers. So I hope that this workshop will be helpful to you in achieving your goals wherever you might be in this process. So without further ado, we're going to start with the overview. So I like to think of the admissions process in stages. like I mentioned, you have pre-application, and then you have the application preparation stage, and then you actually have the submission step. Then hopefully you get interviews, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And then hopefully after those interviews, you're able to get those to turn into acceptances. And it's important to note that not every path to dental school is linear, and it's often very windy and bumpy, and that's completely okay. Even mine, I transferred, I ended up leaving residency and clinical care, and I think it's been all for the better. So in terms of pre-application, this is going to be covered more in the rest of dental school week. But that's more thinking about all the activities that are needed to apply. So you have to complete all of your appropriate prereqs, your extracurriculars, work experience, research. Although it's not necessary, I actually didn't have research prior to going to Harvard, even though it's a pretty well-known research-intensive school. But when I went there and I interviewed, I just assured that they knew that I had a strong interest in certain fields, such as public health and education, and that's where my interest was. So other than that, you also have volunteering and shadowing, making sure that you definitely want to go into dentistry, one field of it. And then you could also put in preparation for the DAT in this stage as well. Okay, so the next stage that I think about is the application preparation. So this is gathering all of your personal information, your experiences that were listed with dates and contacts into a well-crafted description. And my pro tip is to keep a really good log of these experiences, including your extracurriculars, volunteering, shadowing hours, research. Make sure you have the hours, contact information of whoever was supervising you, and your time frame in terms of months and years, because this can be really helpful later when you're applying to put that into the application itself. You should also have a list of achievements that you're, hopefully collecting over time, and just a brief description of what those are. So if you were fortunate to get any when you graduated from high school or at other times, just have a brief little sheet that you're keeping track of. And then make sure that you're collecting your unofficial transcripts so that you can input your grades and make sure you understand how to order those. And then you'll take your DAT and craft a compelling personal statement and prepare those supplemental essays. Something that I did for dental school and residency applications that I found to be really helpful was creating an AdSAS account prior to when I officially launched it. So that's like prior to the cycle. And you can do this because it gives you a sense of what you're going to put on your application, because it looks quite different than other applications that you've submitted in the past. Just make sure that you don't put your information in, because it won't save when the new cycle starts and you don't want to lose everything. But I just think it's helpful to get familiarized with that layout. And then at the end of the cycle, you want to ensure that you save and download a copy of your application from AdSAS, since once again, it's not going to be saved. So you want to make sure that you retain all that valuable information so that you can use it in the future, whether or not you might be reapplying, or just to have that for reference for resumes or interviews or residency applications. Now, the next phase is what we're going to talk about today. Is you hopefully get a memorable email or a phone call and you're invited to your dental school interview. And I think about this in a few subsections. You have the preparation for the interview day, and then post-interview. And finally, hopefully you get an acceptance. And at that point, you need to compare your options, decide on a school, prepare for school, where you're going to live, understand financing options, since dental school is unfortunately like one of the most expensive professional programs to attend. And then you also have to plan for moving and if needed, in that case, and then you're going to actually begin. And that's really exciting. Okay, so let's get focused on the dental school interviews. So we're going to start on the preparation phase, of course. So preparation. First things first, you should research the school that you're interviewing so that it's kind of like a job. You always interview the company. You want to make sure that you're interviewing at the right place. And this is true when you're selecting schools as well. You want to make sure that you're aligned with that program. Otherwise, you might not want to apply there in the first place. So you need to know why you want to go to each school. And by understanding what each school has that they offer and why they're unique and what they value, you're going to be able to craft your responses deliberately for that particular school. And I would recommend first starting by looking at their website, potentially talking to current students or alumni, and you can find them in a range of different places. Sometimes there's Facebook groups, other forums, even Reddit, or Student Doctor Network, or all of your potential helpers on Leland, all those coaches that have gone to many different dental schools. So I would talk to some people who are familiar with the schools. You can also review the school's recent social media posts to get a sense of what they're up to. And then you want to sift through the website and get a sense of what makes that school unique. So as a quick example, once again, like a job, you're researching the school to make sure that you learn a lot about their mission, their vision, and their values. And I took these two excerpts from University of Pennsylvania and Harvard because they're near and dear to my heart. I excluded Penn's vision because it was just too long, but then I highlighted the similarities in yellow and the slight differences in red. But as you can see, they're both very similar. And when you look at a lot of these schools, they are quite similar. However, when you're an applicant applying to one school versus another, if I was applying to HSDM, you want to express the leadership potential and valuing the oral systemic connection, where at Penn, you might want to focus a little bit more on innovation and that exceptional care. And some schools are known for being more research focused or service focused or focused on specializing versus general practice. And you want to make sure that you understand each of those so that you can inform and change your interview responses to stand out and ensure that you're a good fit for them and they're a good fit for you. Okay, so one way that you could do this is you can use Student Doctor Network's dental interview feedback list. So this is a school-specific search through SDN or Student Doctor Network, where you can look at the common interview experiences and questions. And it's a great resource that past interviewees are volunteering, given that they're able to, because sometimes you have non-disclosure agreements. So obviously, if you're interviewing and you sign one of those, then you should not be revealing this information. But just remember that someone's feedback could be out of date for that exact reason. However, from this website, you can gather a lot of information on the style of the interviews, the feel, and the common questions asked. So you can get a sense of if it's, especially after COVID, a lot of these might be virtual, but maybe they are in person. Are they open file, meaning they have access to look at your file before and during the interview, or is it closed file, meaning that they are not going to have access to looking at that? So you might want to provide more background information with your answers. And for each school that you interview at, reviewing these questions that are commonly asked and making a list of them for yourself is going to be really helpful for your practice and review so that you feel comfortable going into that interview. And then sometimes the school may include a general structure of the interview in their invite or confirmation email, or an email prior to the interview. Definitely make sure that you feel comfortable and you know exactly what's going to be going on, because it's going to make you feel best and let your best foot be forward. So these are just some of the things that you would see on SDN. The general stress level that you perceived, the type of interview, open or closed file, and then the style of interview, and then some of the interview questions that they thought were most interesting. And some of them can be things that you've never thought about. So I think it is valuable to get a sense. So let's talk about some of the most common questions that are asked in the dental school interview. So I would recommend collecting a list of all the common dental school interview questions. And there are lists on the web that are available for free. And then also adding a school-specific list. And then now you have this master question list, and it can be a little overwhelming because there's a lot on there. But what I would do is then cluster those similar groups of questions, such as your background questions, like tell me about yourself, what brought you to dentistry, why dentistry? And then you have your behavioral questions, which we'll go over shortly, experience type questions, and character-oriented questions. And at that point, you want to sketch out key thoughts for each question, like the character traits, skills, experiences, and examples that you're going to use to support your response. And I think of it kind of like writing a good paragraph in an essay. You have your claim, and then you have to support it. So you support it with 2 or 3 points, and then you provide examples for each of those. And then you wrap it up in a nice bow to make sure that everything comes together nicely. So once you have these ideas for how you might want to answer questions, then you're going to want to practice crafting a really elegant answer until you get a pretty solid response. And of course, you don't want it to be rehearsed, but you want to be able to draw on the concepts and the ideas that you have thought a lot about so that you feel more comfortable. It's particularly important to practice in a simulated environment with a coach or someone who's going to be able to provide you impactful, constructive feedback. So you don't want to be mock interviewing with a friend or family member who might be afraid to give you quality feedback. You want someone who's going to be able to provide you with very clear, constructive feedback. So that's where a coach on Leland, and there's many great coaches, might be a good option. Now, on the right, I provided a few of the most common dental school questions that you'll be asked by a lot of schools. So the first one that you'll be asked in the middle, tell me about yourself. That's going to be the start of pretty much every interview. You'll definitely be asked why dentistry. You may even be asked why not medicine, depending on your background. How would your friends describe you? This is one of those more character type questions. Your greatest accomplishment and why, that often comes up. Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years is also very common to have a sense of where you might want to be, and what is motivating you and what your values are. Why this school or why not another school? What makes you unique from different applicants is also important, and being able to answer that in a nice, humble, but confident way. So, the most iconic one that you're almost always going to be asked in an interview is tell me about yourself. So, you should have a solid response to this question that provides some basic information about you and your background, along with an interesting fact and wrapping up with your goals. And once you have that, you're going to be able to slowly edit it and review that over time in order to make sure that it still reflects that. It's kind of like your own elevator pitch. So once you have a list of all your questions and you sketch out some of these main points, another one that you're probably going to be asked is something like, why dentistry? And that can be different for every person, but it can include anything from using your hands to helping patients, combining arts and sciences, and then you begin to actually craft a response. So that was more brainstorming, and now you're crafting a response. So for each response's key points, you can build out examples using your own experiences. So for my why dentistry, I might say something like, I appreciate how dentistry blends artistic elements with evidence-based care to help patients improve their oral and their overall health. Throughout college, this became increasingly clear to me from my experiences working in the animal shelter and oral surgery office to caring for my own grandparents. While working at the animal shelter, I enjoyed caring for sick animals, but learned about a variety of medications and behavioral training skills. But the animal care just lacked that human element that I found unique in medicine dentistry. And while caring for grandparents, I saw how medicine lacked the importance of an artistic element in a career that I really valued in dentistry. And when working in oral surgery office, I saw patients come in with affected teeth and leave in a state of improved health. And these experiences reassure me that I wanted to pursue a career in oral health so that I could help them promote better oral and systemic health in my patients via prevention. So what I did in that general answer is acknowledge the main points, which came back to the ones that I brainstormed before about art, the connection between oral and systemic health, and this evidence-based science, and working with humans. And then I am able to support them with these examples that I've experienced over time and then summarize them in my goal. And of course, you don't want to sound robotic. And admittedly, my response was a little bit too well suited because I had it right in front of me. So you want it to feel natural and have a conversation. So when you practice, you're going to practice and you're going to not be reading off a script, but you're going to be reciting those few points in your head to make sure that you know what you want to make sure is said to your interviewers. And you'll start become more automatic, but also more authentic the more comfortable that you feel. So the next type of question that you might be asked is the behavioral questions. And these call for a response aligned with what's called the STAR method. That stands for situation, task, action, result. Acronym STAR. In the situation, you describe the specific situation or past experience so the interviewer understands. So you're laying a groundwork. The task, you're communicating what the details and the goal of that task was. So you're starting to narrow it down. Then in action, you present very clear contributions and the actions that you took. It's very much in the I, not the we, because you're the person doing it. And you're going to ensure success by showing them those solid examples that support that skill that you're trying to emphasize. And then the result is you wrap it up by showing the positive outcome result via accomplishments or growth, because sometimes you have failure and that's okay, but it's about the mindset and maturity of how to move forward. So let's practice what that looks like. So let's work through this particular question. So you might be asked, tell me about a time when you failed. How would you respond? So the situation, when you're describing it, I could say, when I was a president of X club at Y University, I failed to properly delegate cast when planning the fall festival, which made it less successful than it could have been. Now I'm going to dive in a little bit more. The group that I was leading had 30 members, and during our planning meetings, I struggled to get adequate participation and volunteers to help creating posters, volunteering at the event, decorating, and ordering food. Now the action. In the beginning, I asked for volunteers during the large meetings, but people were more reserved because in that setting, they felt that others might volunteer. So I tried the breakout sessions to brainstorm and to try to approaching people based off of their strengths, which showed some success. And then I learned that the smaller groups, people were more willing to volunteer their skills and they had more participation. Then I wrap up with the result. While the fall festival was not as successful as it could have been due to my failure to get my group members engaged early on, by later in the year, we were able to improve the delegation, organize, and have better leadership skills, which allowed the group to grow and for me to grow. And I'm grateful to have this experience because I'm better prepared now and have a greater toolkit for this situation. So you always should admit that you have a weakness or that you failed, because we all have, whether we want to admit it or not. And you should be able to choose the answer that has showed that growth, but not in a way that's a vital flaw. They want to know that you're self-aware and humble, but you shouldn't allow something that's too much of a vital flaw to be articulated. So it's important to be cognizant of what you're presenting. So once again, just in terms of preparing for these common interview questions, you don't need to print out a list per se. You could have it on your laptop. I prefer to print it because I just feel like I can sketch out ideas better, change wording, uh, X out, erase. But this general process is occurring. So you print or create this list of these common and these school specific questions. You're sketching out these ideas of how you might approach it and present potential examples that you want to use. One thing I will say is that it's good to have different examples for even the same question that highlight your skills differently, because sometimes you'll be asked two similar questions, and if you only have one answer, then you might not feel comfortable using the same using the same answer, and then you might start feeling uncomfortable. So it's important to think about a couple options for how you might answer similar questions so that you feel most equipped. Um, and then you want to practice forming those answers and self-critiquing. And at that point, when you're starting to feel like you've gained some understanding and confidence, you should do a mock interview with a coach that's going to give you that constructive feedback and will simulate the real situation. You should dress like you're going to dress in that day and get into the mindset, because that's going to help you feel most comfortable on the interview day. And then after the mock interview, you should go back and revise and do a little editing, make sure that you feel like you're improving and growing, and then continue that process until you get to the point where you're feeling ready. And sometimes you don't feel fully ready, but after 2 to 3 times, people typically feel more prepared. So in terms of mock interviews, um, I think that this quote really tells it all. Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Does anyone know who said that? Anyone want to add that in the chat? That's okay. This is actually very fitting for the Super Bowl coming up. This was Vince Lombardi who said this. So he's the one who's named after the Lombardi Trophy is named after him. So when we prepare for any interview, you really want to prepare in a simulated environment where the mock interview is supposed to do that. So it's your opportunity to get constructive feedback from people who are going to give that to you. And as an interviewer, it's obvious to me when a person is serious, when they're very well prepared and coming to the interview, and I can tell that they've had some thought that has gone into their preparation. And by completing one or a few of these prior to your first or even later interviews, you're going to feel more confident and prepared when you're walking into the real thing. I would definitely recommend um, mock interviews for dental school admissions. And it's very important to know what school and what their format of the interview is so that you can best gauge that. Um, and I think it's always amazing to see the growth from one mock interview to the next. So once again, really important that you can get someone who's going to really give you true constructive feedback. As much as we love our friends and family, sometimes they are not always willing to give that to you because they think really highly of you. And that is okay. But in this situation, you want to find someone who can give you that real feedback. While they might not be well, these mock interviews might not feel very comfortable in the moment, they will be designed to make you feel more comfortable and less stressed during the real interviews. And that's what's important. So let's just quickly review what the 4 types of main interviews that you might see. And I'm not really considering the like Casper type interviews for this. I'm thinking more of the traditional types of interviews that you'll see on like a given interview day with a dental school. So the traditional tends to be often like a one-on-one. It can be varying lengths of time from 15 minutes to an hour. I had one that was 15 minutes and recorded, and another one that was multiple 30-minute and 1-hour interviews. And these interviews days can range from like 3 people to 80 plus. So it can really vary. So don't be surprised with how that looks based in the school. Then you can have panel interviews. And what panel interviews are, you have one interviewee, hopefully you, with multiple interviewers, and they're asking you different questions, but all listening to your responses. I saw this once in a residency interview, but not in dental school personally. Then you have group interviews. This is when you have multiple, sorry, interviewees that are answering the same question in front of everyone else and the interviewer. These tend to be the most competitive because everyone's trying to positively stand out. However, I don't think it's super common. I had this once in a college, but one thing I will say is it's really hard because I was left to answer the questions last all the time, and you feel like you don't want to say what someone else has already said. So if you are in one of those, feel confident enough to not be the last person, because those can be really tricky. Thankfully, I haven't seen them much in dental school. And then you have the MMIs, which are called multiple mini interviews. These are definitely more common in medical schools, but they're definitely be adopted by dental schools. And think of this as like a speed dating. You have a set limited time, typically like 5 to 10 minutes at each station, and you're going to have these multiple stations with different people to answer these questions. And the main questions you're going to be asked, and these are type of ethical scenarios, something like, is healthcare a right or a privilege, or what would you do in this situation involving a particular patient? And what they're going to be looking for is how you respond. Are you calm? Are you flustered? What questions would you ask to clarify? Are you careful and deliberate, or are you making more rash decisions? So that's the ethical scenario. Then you have character development, and this could even involve acting, but this is along the lines of those behavioral type questions using that STAR method. And this could be things more like, what's your greatest weakness? Or tell me about a time that you failed. And then you have teamwork. And this is the last type that you might see. And this is when you have one person, this is when you have a group of people who are trying to work together to solve a problem. And this is where they're looking for teamwork, collaboration, communication, patience, creativity. And this is where like you might have a group that has to work together to solve a particular problem, and you'll need to be able to effectively work in a team environment. So that's a general overview. The last thing that I'll say, one of the last things before we get towards interview day itself, is it's really, really important to review your own application. By reviewing your activities, your essays, you're going to remember what your narrative is, who you are, and what they're going to be seeing from you. And it's really important that you recall these experiences that you have to draw on during your interviews. And this is going to help you be able to craft your answers so that you're going to be able to best fit them with that school, since you've done that school specific research. The interview allows you to dive deeper into those experiences in history and why you want to be a dentist at this particular school. So if you had an open file interview, you want to make sure that you're adding to that conversation. If it's closed file, then you might have to catch them up a little bit. So it's good that you've also reviewed that application. So by reviewing your application, you can also make sure that you know what you might want to address. If there's anything that you feel should be addressed, like a transfer or poor grades in classes, withdrawals, conduct violations, and think about how you might want to address that beforehand. Then you want to think about it from the interviewer's perspective. Um, how are they going to perceive the way that you're answering these questions? Are they going to get a good feeling or vibe from you? Would you be someone that is teachable? How will you fit? And I think it's really important to note that most interviews tend to be conversational to get to know you, but rarely some schools do have stress interviews. So you should be prepared and be calm and professional in both situations. So another thing I would recommend is that you might be asked, like, what do you think the biggest concern in dentistry is right now? Or where do you see dentistry heading in 10 years? To answer these questions, you have to know a little bit about the state of oral healthcare right now. So, what I would recommend doing is do some research by looking at the ADA's journal called the JADA, JADA, Journal of the American Dental Association. You can look at publications from ASDA, ASDA, the Student Dental Association, and ADEA, which is ADEA, or the American Dental Education Association, and all of their publications, social media websites. And it's going to help you get an idea of what a few topics are occurring right now in dentistry. And for an interview, I would aim to have a basic understanding of a lot of different things and then have more depth in one or two areas. So prior to a few of my interviews, I reviewed a few of like the free recent JADA articles, and a couple of my interviews, I referenced them by pulling a study about prescribing patterns by dentists based off of patient ethnicity. And I discussed in my interviews concerns about ethics, diversity, bias, quality of care, and informing my understanding of dentistry more broadly. And I think it's really important that you stay informed as a pre-dental student, but also once you're in dentistry. And it just highlights your thoughtfulness. So these are a few of the topics that, are topics in dentistry right now, which is the growth of dental service organizations, staffing issues, technological advancements, cost of care related technological advancements, antibiotic and opioid stewardship and prescribing patterns, AI, and dental therapists, and access to care. And then the last thing before we get into the actual interview day is it's really, really important that you prepare unique, thoughtful questions for each interviewer. So for each school, I had many questions for each person, probably 20 questions for current students about anything as small as like printers to like the best place to eat nearby. And then I also had quite a few for interviewers. I probably had about 5 to 6 for each interviewer that I was supposed to have because I wanted to make sure that I had multiple to draw from. And I would recommend having, 8 to 12 questions prepared and trying to make them school specific. Such as unique programs and organizations that they offer, student groups, opportunities that are intriguing to you, whether it be global health or research or clinical care. And although it varies on number of interviewers, I would say at least 3 to 4 unique questions per interviewer shows that you put in a lot of time and effort. And if you can Google the answer, then it's better to not ask it because it actually ends up backfiring and showing a lack of understanding for the school. So you really want to show that you have done that research that we started off talking about and developing these questions that intrigue you about the school, because you're not just getting interviewed by them, you're interviewing them. You're going to be there for 4 years. Okay, 3 years for UOP, but 4 years, and that's a lot of time. You want to make sure that you're choosing the right school for you. So you're trying to assess whether you're going to be a good fit there, or you're going to be happy. If you have to choose between schools, which one do you want to choose and why? And you can assess this by saying, like, I'd love to know, like, you can ask them things like, what do you love about working here? You can also ask other questions. That's a little bit broad, but it gives them a sense that you're interested in why they like it. Okay, so without further ado, let's talk about the big day. The big day. Woohoo. So, oh, sorry. So interview day has arrived. The interview is going to be your chance to show who you are. You're not just reiterating your resume or your application. You want to show them how you've developed to become your unique person, what your unique goals are, and the dentist that you want to be. So while interviews don't start on Zillow, but I do spend a lot of time there because it's a bad habit. One thing I've noticed is that there is a real psychology to the real estate market. Which of these would you rather rent, live, or live next to? So we have these two photos. Um, one maybe was actually from Zillow, but the other one was not. Um, sorry. Um, and which one would you want to live next to? Or which one would you swipe by? So appearances and first impressions are really powerful. It only takes people about a tenth of a second, no more typically than 3 to 7 seconds, to create an impression and a judgment of others. And while, it's not good for us to be judging a book based on its cover, having and bias is not justifiable. It is something we have to work with. Um, we all probably make judgments based on our biases of these two houses. And unfortunately, our interviewers could potentially be doing that as well. So here are a few tips that I'm going to give you about how to make yourself most presentable. So you're more like the welcoming house on the left than um, the house that may be really lovely on the right, but just doesn't, you don't give it a chance. So first impressions do matter, they do count. So dressing to impress, it's okay to stand out a little, but you have to tread a very fine line. So these are just my general recommendations. Um, be professional. You should be wearing clean pants or a skirt suit with some stylistic license. I wore gray, and that was me feeling like I was standing out. A smile is a best accessory. You want to show that they're happy to be there. Good hygiene. Be comfortable, because if you're not comfortable and you have uncomfortable shoes, or something else, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be presenting your best self. Neutral colors are pretty safe, like your black, navy, gray, tan. If you're going to wear makeup, I personally recommend, and this is not saying you get right or wrong, but I typically would go a little bit more natural and professional. Um, Shoes, I'd recommend flats or small heels because you could be walking quite a bit depending on tours. Um, I would bring a pad folio or some thing to write with a pen, and a business friendly bag. For men, shirt and tie with suit is pretty standard, and then more conservative dress clothes typically. Okay. So what do you want to actually bring to an interview? So portfolios can be pretty expensive. However, if you just have extra paper like a notebook and a pen, that's perfectly fine. Um, they'll probably provide you with ample food, water. However, I was a little over the top, and I always brought my own because I knew that it would be available if I needed it. And also, if you have different food restrictions or allergies, it's always good to have them just in case. You should have your phone, but I would put it on silent once you arrive on campus, and do not be checking your phone. If you have a portfolio of artwork, then and it's able to be brought with you, you can bring it, or you can bring pictures, but it's absolutely not necessary. And it's nice to have if it comes up, but you also don't need to push to offer it either. I did see some people who were very impressive artists who had portfolios, and I think it was helpful. I did not, and I didn't find that it was not helpful. You should have a copy of your resume and application handy just in case. It's also good for you to review. Hygiene products, whether it's feminine, oral, deodorant, just making sure that you have what you might need. And then any other papers that they requested on the website or via email for you to bring. Sometimes they do ask you to bring like a waiver or a headshot or something. And always bring your best attitude. Anyone and everyone that interacts with you, no matter who it is, whether it's in the front desk or someone who might be cleaning, they could be involved with having something to say. So treat everyone like a nice, normal human being. Like I hope you always will, and you should be fine. However, I like to ensure success by planning ahead and being early to your interviews, because you can't predict when you're going to have traffic or construction and cause delays. So when I interviewed at Columbia, I was driving to New York City with my brother in the morning because we lived about 2.5 hours away, maybe 3 hours away. And while we were going over the George Washington Bridge, and this is not that far from Columbia, a person in the car in front of us hit that car, and then they put their car in reverse, got out of the car, and then it hit our car. Thankfully, everyone was okay. All the cars were fine, but that could have been really bad. Thankfully, we were early, so I had enough time to decompress before the interview. But you want to be early. You want to reduce your stress so that you go in and present your best self. So try to, if you can, get in the night before. I know with flying or driving and costs of hotels and this whole process can be rather expensive. It is ideal. However, it's not always possible, and that's okay. But especially when you're going to places that have more inclement weather, it's something to be aware of because you don't want to miss your interview. Set multiple alarms to ensure that you get up or have someone plan to call you if they don't hear from you by a given time, and then plan to leave early and walk to drive to your interview. If you are in the night before, it's not a bad thing to know how you're going to get there and kind of practice whether it's a walking route or driving, as long as you do that safely. Okay, so I saw this and I thought it was funny. My first reaction when I see an animal is to say hello. My first reaction when I see a person is to avoid eye contact and hope it goes away. So while this could be your normal, you want to really avoid this, even if you feel that way some way. That's okay. Um, but practice making eye contact in mock interviews. It does not need to be constant, but often eye contact shows that you're being engaged and that you're trying to be connecting to that person. And therefore, in general, nonverbal communication is important. So you should think from the interviewer's perspective or from your future patient's perspective. Who do you want your dentist to be? You probably want them to be someone who is professional with all people who they interact with. They're respectful, they're honest, they're compassionate, kind, caring, humble, collaborative, open minded, determined. And you want to express all these things via the words you say, and also, more importantly, how you act throughout the entire day with every person you meet. So here's a few of those keys. So a firm handshake when you meet people and when the interview's over. A smile often is really great. Holding eye contact, a natural amount, but making sure that you're making eye contact. Show that you're present by not using your phone, and then use a portfolio or a pen to take notes during the presentations to show engagement, but also so that you have that information for later. And if you want someone's contact information, write it down in your notebook or get their card so that you can send your thank you email afterwards. And for interviewers, just kindly ask them at the end of the interview. They'll probably give you the business card or they'll write it down for you. And then in terms of verbal communication, when you're talking and answering questions, follow these general pointers. So you want to talk calmly and clearly. Don't speak rapidly like I'm doing right now. Express your enthusiasm and your passion when you're talking. You want to think before you speak to make sure that you know what you're saying and that it's appropriate, and take your time. You don't want to rush through. Yes, you are on time limit, but you will likely feel that you need to rush through questions and you don't necessarily need to. Um, if you are running over the amount of time that you might need, they will gently let you know that. In a quick example, when I was in medical school, I had to give an oral presentation and I was in a time pressure. So I cut my response premature and my instructor asked if I had anything left that I wanted to remark on. And I said, well, I was considering these other things, but I didn't mention them out of sake of time. Well, he said that if I didn't mention that that was actually something that is imperative to always ask about in particular patients because it can actually be legal. And if this was one of his residents, he would have failed them if they didn't had mentioned it. So this is all to say, take your time and say what you need to say. If you're running over, they will let you know. So in summary, try not to be repetitive and go on tangents, but do include all the important information that you feel needs to be included in your response. And then one of the last goal points is be yourself, be honest, present your best self, but still be yourself. Be true to you. This is your opportunity to show them who you truly are, not just a piece of paper. Your interview and your application should create this one cohesive narrative of who you are. And this allows the interviewers and the admissions committee to better understand who you are, how you're going to fit, how you're going to make a great oral care provider. So don't act like someone else. Be honest, be prepared, but be your best self and who you would want your dentist to be. So in terms of what you might expect in an interview day, you will probably arrive to this interview room and receive a folder. You'll probably get something like a schedule of the day with more information about the school, and then you'll have different components of the day made up of a few of these different things, like a welcome and overview, a tour, the interviews, lunch, financial aid, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging session, and a student panel. There may not always be a student panel, and interview setups can range pretty widely. Um, but it's really important for you to know that if this school is the right fit for you. Of the 9 interviews I did, I felt that I could see myself at almost all of the schools, but a couple I didn't for various reasons. And it was just how I felt that I felt fit there. And it's important to know what you're looking for in an ideal school. Um, and there's also a chance that you may not get into that dream school. And if not, that's okay. But you should know what other options you're looking at. So you should get a sense of if you fit, are you happy? Do you like the surrounding area? Could you see yourself living there for 4 years? And is there anything that particularly stands out? And then, you know, you should enjoy yourself responsibly, of course. But these are really great times to meet a lot of people who have common goals and interests to yourself. Really appreciate this opportunity. Enjoy the memorable moments and act and speak professionally the whole time to everyone that you meet and talk with. Okay. Now, all these tips also apply to our virtual interviews as well. I just want to quickly go through the post interview tips. So, post interview, you should definitely send thank you emails to your interviewers. And I ideally would even send them to whoever was hosting, like if there was a admissions representative that was hosting you. And ideally, it'd be nice to send them to like a student tour guide. You can make a draft or template ahead of time, and that's what I did. And then each time I made each one unique and personalized. So if I sent out 3 for one school, each of them had similarities, but they were each unique and different. Because that's something else. They um, can put those into the file. So if they're the same exact one, it's nice, but it's another extra step to show that it's more personalized. So try to send that the evening or afternoon once you leave, if you can, if not the following morning or soon thereafter. Make sure you have a professional voicemail set up and check your emails frequently, including your junk and spam folders, and make sure that you're still preparing for other interviews or potentially having to reapply. And my key points for you. So as I'm sitting here waiting for spring and the Groundhog's Day didn't go as I would have liked because we're predicting more winter, I want to leave you with this nice floral acronym for you to remember our key points. So it's tulip. So as a tulip blossoms with the proper nourishment like sunlight, water, nutrients, um, while it can blossom on its own, often some tender love and care allow it to reach its full potential. So I believe that we're all tulips. We have the potential to create beautiful, our beauty in ourselves and others, and with some extra support that's going to help us achieve those goals. So, dental school admissions process appears daunting, uh, but with a helpful hand from your coaches at Leland, you can blossom into your best candidate self and dentist to be. And I'd love to learn more about you, your unique journeys, and we have so many other great dental coaches at Leland, and I think that anyone would be happy to help you. So, what TULIP stands for is stay true to yourself. Try to be as undeniable as possible. Leave that positive impression. Think about it from the interviewer's perspective and the school's perspective, and then prepare. That's going to allow you to be most comfortable and have the best consistency. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hope that this has been a helpful overview for you. If you have any questions, I will take a look at those. So once again, thank you for joining. Here's a few QR codes. It's been a joy working with Leland and getting to know the other dental school coaches. So I think any of them will be amazing help. And I really hope that you guys continue joining for the rest of Dental School Week on Leland. So I'm going to take a quick look at some of your questions. So I'm starting from the bottom. PowerPoint might be accessible after the session. The recording will be, this is recorded. And I think Amanda probably has more info on that. To find the values and missions for each school, you can look on their website, and typically they'll have a section like about us. So you can go there, and you can even put in Google like X school, mission, values, vision. And as far as finding students, You can find out often online, to be honest. Reddit, sometimes they have different groups. Student Doctor Network sometimes has groups of people who are willing to answer questions about their school. Um, those I feel like are some of the most common places. Um, Let me see. Yes, you can absolutely bring your list of questions for the interviewers to your interview so you don't have to memorize them. I would Sometimes I'd print them out, sometimes I'd write them on, like, my notebook when I brought that with me. Yes, bring them with you because in the moment, you're gonna forget them because I know I was always so stressed about everything else that I would forget them. So definitely bring them with you and have them, and you can start working on them ahead of time so you don't have to, like, think the night before. Um, I heard that it's not really important what the answers to the questions are, rather it's the delivery of those answers. If this is true, how can we improve the delivery? Yeah, so I think it's kind of both, right? You don't wanna be robotic and you wanna kind of the right impression, but to some degree of the answer matters though. Like if you give an answer that's more of a red flag, then it's like, oh, okay, like, yeah, maybe it's not as good. Um, but in terms of the delivery, I do agree that delivery is really important. Um, and how to practice it, I think it's really just practicing, and having that constructive feedback from someone who's willing to give that to you. The other thing is you could even record yourself. There's ways like even with Zoom, you could ask yourself these questions and see how you are performing on those questions. I think that that can be rather revealing because I still do that sometimes myself, and I'm always shocked. Um, so I hope that answered your question. Um, Oh, Alyssa, not 80 plus people interviewing me, but I was interviewing alongside 80 other students on that day. Sorry, I should have made that more clear. Um, doesn't matter how big or small these failures are. So I think, like I said, you don't want it to be a vital error. Like if there's, um, ideally. However, sometimes those things allow us to grow. And I think it does come in stride in terms of maturity and growth and how we see our perspectives. Um, I think that there's certainly some failures that are a little safer to go with than others, but um, it's inevitable that we all sometimes make some big mistakes. I think the biggest thing is making sure that you can convey your character and values through to show that growth and your values. Um, what makes you unique from other applicants? Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to go about answering that. I think the best way is to humbly understand and note that there's so many other great interviewees and candidates and that you're fortunate to be considered. And then note, I think this is what really does it is connecting you and the school and at what you both can contribute and get from each other. So how is it that you are a good fit for them? So if they're really big on research and you have research, that might be something good to highlight and maybe point out, oh, I really would like to work in this area, maybe potentially with this person's lab, and this is what I can contribute to them. So it's just showing not just that you're interested in them, but that you can contribute and how you're going to be a good fit for them long term. Um, Oh, thank you for answering that question for each other. That's great. Uh, the Harvard pre-dental opportunity. I don't know exactly what you mean here in this comment, but I do know Harvard ADSDA, the Student Dental Association, does put on pre-dental things, and you should definitely take a look at their Instagram page if you're interested. Um, all the people I've worked with in Harvard ASBA colleagues have done a great job putting on those events, and you can always reach out to them. I think that's all the questions that I was seeing there. So I'll keep going down further and make sure I didn't miss any new questions. Okay. Finally reached down. Avoid using filler words. What's a good practice tip? Yeah, so I think Haley had a really great response to that. I also think, as I just say, um, again, this is where recording yourself can be really helpful because you start to pick up on what you keep saying. Sometimes I'll say certain phrases, not just filler words, and I notice that. And you can start picking it up. You can also, once again, mock interviews, whoever it might be, if they're willing to give you that insight, make sure that you ask them, can you please tell me what filler words I'm doing? And sometimes, like, I remember I was practicing for interviews at my college career center, and it was like they did a tally of each time I said something that was a filler word. So that might be another way to practice, have someone do something like that for you. Um,
Hey, Kristie, I do think we have to wrap up so we can
oh
start
yeah,
Ellen's personal statement deep dive, but thank you so much for hosting today. It's been an incredible session, and we're so lucky to have you as a coach on our platform.
thank you. And thank you everyone else for coming out. I appreciate it. Sorry for running over. Thank you for letting me know, Amanda.